What's going on, guys? Today we're going to be talking about the tech layoffs. Before we get into that, book a free 15-minute overemployed call down below in the description box or the pinned comment. We'll answer any overemployed questions you have and give you structured advice to become overemployed. So book that free call down below. Cool, so let's talk about the tech layoffs. So we're going to talk about why they're not actually that bad. And we're also going to mention why I think they happened. And if you have any opinions on why they happened or if you think they're bad or not, leave that comment down below. Okay, so first, I'm going to put up a chart of how many layoffs kind of happened recently, so you can kind of see that number there. So I don't have it off the top of my head, but I know a lot of companies, and if you don't know, basically Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, Google, all of these companies, Spotify, fired basically or laid off thousands and thousands of engineers. For a lot of these companies, for example, like Google, it was about 12,000 people just recently, about 6% of their workforce. So pretty significant drops of staff, right? And in general, a lot of these companies kind of came out of nowhere with this. So it kind of started with Twitter, with Elon Musk, and that one was really dramatic and significant because Elon Musk was part of that. But like even recently with this Google layoff, no one's really batting an eye. Like it's pretty significant, and obviously people acknowledge that, but they're not going crazy about it. They're not being like, "Oh my God, Google laid off this many people," right? It's kind of normalized to this extent now that people are getting laid off. So I want to talk about though why this isn't actually that bad. So I'm going to put up a chart here as well that I actually posted on our community post. So if you don't ever check out our community post, check those out. Sometimes I put good information there. So you can see the chart says tech companies laying off workers after the pandemic hiring sprees. So these tech layoffs, in my opinion, are correlated to the pandemic and the hiring, the overhiring, you could say, that went on. So you can see the chart here has, with the orange color, the recent layoffs announced, and in the purplish color, the pandemic headcount growth. So the amount of people they hired around the time of the pandemic. And the time of the pandemic, they're considering it anywhere between kind of early 2020, late 2019 to quarter three of 2022. So just recently. So you can see, for example, Microsoft, they laid off just recently 10,000 people, but during the pandemic, they hired almost 80,000 people, right? So basically an eighth of the amount they hired were laid off. You can see Google, they did 12,000 layoffs, but they hired 70,000 people. You can see Amazon laid off 18,000, but during the pandemic, they hired 750,000 people. You can see Meta, same thing, 11,000 laid off, but they hired 43,000. And Spotify, you get the story, right? So these are pretty big numbers. And I think a lot of people get surprised when they see how many people were hired during the pandemic. So if you actually look at these numbers, you'll realize it's not actually that bad, like the amount of people that are laid off. Like the numbers sound big, but when you compare it to the amount of people that were hired, right, it's pretty insane. And I know this pandemic hiring range is from 2020 to 2022, but even if you cut it for just one of the years, it'll still be way over the amount of people that were laid off, right? So why this happened, in my opinion, is the advent of remote work. So when the pandemic started, remote work became this novel thing that everyone had access to, right? Before remote work it was allowed for engineers and like senior product people, things like that. But in general, yeah, it was just delegated or divided only out for the really senior people that have really proved their knowledge at a company for maybe over 10 plus years, and every now and then there's the odd remote position that is open to every position, but it's very rare to find that in a company. So basically when everyone had remote work available to them, it opened up your ability to work anywhere essentially. So let's say you're based out of Boston, but you want to work for a company in Seattle. Well, before you would have to move there, but now with remote work, that Seattle company can hire you. So let's say you also wanted to work in California, maybe. Well, that company in California can also hire you remotely, right? And you can work at either of those companies. So what happened was a lot of these companies started knowing that anyone can work for basically any company now in the tech space. So what that meant was they needed to poach all of that talent before all the other companies did. So now that California company wants to get that Boston employee before that Seattle company does, right? Because if they don't get these employees, other companies will. And that basically takes away from potential top talent at their company. So in my opinion, why they hired this many people during the pandemic was because they wanted to poach away all of the top talent before the other companies did, right? And does that mean that was like a good strategy in terms of like they really had a need for these engineers or tech workers? No, they really didn't, right? Probably. But at the end of the day, it's still a good strategy, right? It takes away from your other competitive companies in terms of taking away their top talent. Like, they could always get access to it in case they ever needed it. And obviously they knew they could always lay off people if needed. And that's kind of what they did. So they overhired so much because they wanted to take away the top talent from other companies, in my opinion. If you agree with that or if you disagree, leave a comment down below. And another thing I want to mention is you'll notice that a lot of people that you might hear that are getting laid off are also people that were seniors, right? Like people that maybe had 15, 20 years experience or even 10 years, whatever, like people that were established at their companies. And a lot of people theorize that this was done to kind of bring in a new culture at companies, right? So bringing a new culture, bringing a new innovative edge that these companies have kind of been maybe idling on too long. They haven't been changing much. Someone thinks of Google. Well, no one really thinks of Google like as a crazy innovator anymore, right? Obviously, they have their small projects here and there, but no one will really think of Google like, well, that's crazy. I would want to work there because we're going to work on crazy cutting edge stuff, right? That was a little back before, maybe a few years ago. So basically, I don't think it's that bad. If these layoffs scare you, there's really no reason they should be, right? I mean, you can go on LinkedIn right now and you'll see hundreds of thousands, basically like over 100,000 remote jobs available for tech workers with good skills. And there's really no lack of remote jobs at this point, even with all these layoffs. So like the video, leave a comment down below explaining your thoughts or opinions, and remember to subscribe to the channel, and I will see you next time.